Today we're looking at the 5 best and the 5 worst dialogue tips, starting with number 5, and then we'll build our way up to number 1. Hi, I'm John Matthew Fox of Bookfox, and let's get started right away with the 5th best piece of writing advice. Create distinctive voices for each character. I think a great example of this would be in The Wire, contrasting Stringer Bell with Snoop's way of speaking. So Stringer Bell has a foot in 2 worlds. One is like the corporate organizational CEO realm, and then the other is the streets. And what's beautiful is that his dialogue reflects that. So he says stuff like, "Chair ain't recognize your ass," which combines a sort of formal meeting protocol with like this lowbrow street language. In contrast, look at a character like Snoop, who speaks with this very heavy Baltimore accent and curses a ton. So in season 4, when buying a nail gun, you can see how much more casual her language is, how much more street fluenced it is than Stringer Bell. And ultimately, for your novel, you want to find a way where every single character of yours sounds a little bit different. The 5th worst dialogue mistake would be having identical speech patterns for all your characters. And one place where I see this a lot is in fantasy novels where you have, say, a very low-born peasant speak with the exact same cadence and diction level as this very high-born king. Like in the book Aragon, which is part of the inheritance cycle, you have this kid who's a farm boy who has had minimal education, who can't even read at the beginning of book 1, and suddenly you put him around all these high-born nobles and he adopts the exact same speech patterns as they have. Another example would be historical novels, where more recent lingo sneaks into character dialogue. For example, the words stressed and traumatized didn't exist until the 1930s, so if you're writing a book before then, wipe that out. The word okay wasn't used until the 1830s. And you know the phrase have chemistry? Nobody had chemistry before the 1700s, so if you're writing before that point, it didn't exist. Or the phrase running on adrenaline. Well, adrenaline wasn't discovered until 1901, so your character wouldn't really say that. And if you want to get better overall at your dialogue writing, take my dialogue course. It is 28 videos. You will definitely not regret it. Celine says it is good for both beginners and more advanced writers. Jenny said it made her dialogue writing much more realistic, and now she no longer dreads writing dialogue. And Bill said he loved the writing exercises and the tools. I'll put a link to that in the description below so you can check it out. Let's move on to the 4th best piece of advice. Use subtext effectively. Normally in this scenario, I'd bring up Hemingway's Hills Like White Elephants, but let's skip that and instead go for Cormac McCarthy's No Country for Old Men, specifically the scene in the gas station. Anton in this scene never actually says, "Hey, I'm going to kill you if this coin flip goes wrong." Instead, what does he do? He chews corn nuts in the most menacingly way possible. There are awkward, long silences between the two of them. And he just keeps on repeating like, call the coin, like call whether it's going to be heads or tails. The threat never needs to be stated outright in the dialogue, it's just implied. Now, the 4th worst dialogue technique would be on-the-nose dialogue. This is dialogue that is telling, not showing. Dialogue in which characters are saying, "I'm so angry right now," rather than doing something that will show their anger. And I think this clip of Star Wars from the prequel series is a great example of this.
"You're so beautiful."
It's only because I'm so in love.
No, no, it's because I'm so in love with you.
So love has blinded you?
Well, that's not exactly what I meant.
But it's probably true.
Look, this is first draft dialogue. This is where the author doesn't quite know what they want to say yet, but like thinks the character should be saying something about love. It's just so painfully earnest and bad, like it makes me cringe just listening to it again. Now listen, if you are a Star Wars fan and you love the prequels, feel free to fight with me in the comments. Put your dukes up and I'll, give it my best shot to rebut you. But overall, I think most people would agree that the dialogue here and elsewhere is kind of terrible. Now, the 3rd best dialogue tip is to embrace realistic interruptions and overlaps. Let's look at Marriage Story, which I think is a great example of sort of natural, messy conversations. Now, what are Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson doing? They're constantly interrupting each other, which I feel like is essential for the way that a real argument happens. They're talking over each other, which makes the dialogue itself feel like a true fight. And there's also these non sequiturs where one character says something and instead of responding to it, the other character says something completely different. And non sequiturs happen all the time in real dialogue. And little dialogue exercise for you, go to the mall or, sit in a bus or public transportation or something and just listen to characters, listen to the way that they speak, and you will see that real conversation is inherently messy. The third worst dialogue mistake would be overusing names in conversation. And the reason why this is bad is it's simply not realistic. Like, people don't often use other people's names every single time they refer to that person. And for a great example of this, let's go to the worst best movie of all time, which is, of course, The Room. There's an infamous scene where he says, "Oh, hi, Mark." And it just shows how awkward it seems for him to say his name before saying what he wants to say. I do feel like I could do an entire video just on The Room telling you what not to do as a writer, but I think that's for a different time. Another example where I see this a lot is medical dramas where doctors are constantly saying doctor this, doctor that, doctor that. It's like they can't speak without actually saying the person's name that they're referring to. So in your dialogue writing, try to use character names as minimally as possible. It's not as though you never need to use them, but keep them minimal. Now let us look at the second best piece of dialogue advice. It is let characters talk past each other occasionally. By talking past each other, I just mean have communication failures in one way or another, because bad fiction is where all the dialogue communicates perfectly. There are never any mistakes. Everyone understands each other perfectly. In Raymond Carver's short story, What We Talk About When We Talk About Love, there are wonderful failures of communication all throughout this story. I don't think anybody in the story is really truly understanding each other. So the character Mel starts stories that he doesn't finish, like one about the elderly couple and one about the knight in armor. All the characters are talking and talking and talking, but they're talking past one another. They're not truly communicating. Another example would be from Sally Rooney's Normal People, where Connell and Marianne frequently don't say what they actually want to say. They keep it to themselves. They stay silent. And instead, what they actually do say is not what they're thinking. So there's this beautiful contrast between what they're thinking and what they actually communicate to each other. On the other hand, the second worst dialogue mistake would be dialogue that only serves plot exposition. So this is something like, as you know, the nuclear core will explode in 47 minutes unless we disable it. Now, if the other character doesn't know that, it's fine to tell them that once, but I think the idea of using dialogue as a way to forward the plot is generally a bad idea. Another example would be characters in disaster movies explaining all the scientific phenomena that they already understand, but the reader doesn't. In my video, Turn These 8 Boring Scenes into Your Reader's Favorite, I talk about how Michael Crichton's book, Andromeda Strain, he will spend pages upon pages belaboring scientific points for far too long in dialogue, and that really bores the reader. And now we've worked our way up to the very best dialogue tip. Number 1, reveal character through speech patterns. A great example of this is the way that Walter White's speech patterns change from the beginning of the show to later on in the show. And let me give you 2 examples. In the very first episode of Breaking Bad, we see Hank and Walter Jr. and Walter White handling a gun, and Walter is so hesitant.
No, it's just heavy.
Contrast that to later in the series where he is confronting Skylar, his wife, and this is the famous "I am the one who knocks" speech.
I am not in danger, Skylar. I am the danger.
Listen to the contrast and pay attention to how his dialogue, sort of hesitant and faltering, reflects who he is at the beginning of that series, and then how the powerful, strident dialogue, very dogmatic and domineering, how that reflects who he becomes later on. So make sure that your character's dialogue changes as they evolve as a person throughout your book. And now finally, let's get to the number 1 dialogue mistake, and it is overwriting accents phonetically. This is when dialects are spelled out so heavily that it becomes extremely difficult to read them. For my book club, one of the members chose this book called The Wake by Paul Kingsnorth. And the entire book is written in this Old English from about the 11th century. I mean, take a look at this dialogue. Do you honestly think you could get through a whole book reading this and figuring it out? I couldn't. I actually couldn't finish it because I didn't want to treat every single sentence as a puzzle. Another example would be characters speaking in such exaggerated accents that they become caricatures rather than authentic representations. Look at Joel Chandler Harris's Uncle Remus and his Brer Fox and Brer Rabbit representations of African-American speech. It's considered offensive today because it went too far in trying to change the spelling to represent phonetically what was was being said. A brilliant counterpoint to this would be in Percival Everett's novel James, which is a retelling of Huck Finn. And Jim, in this book, he does this brilliant code switching. He does this exaggerated caricature of African vernacular when he's talking to the masters, and then when he's talking to friends, he just speaks normally. Hey, check out the dialogue course. The link is in the description. If you want access to all my courses, get a subscription to Bookfox Academy, and may your dialogue writing be brilliant and whip smart.